What's happening, everybody? Welcome to the channel. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you. Hit the subscribe button, hit the thumbs up, hit the notification bell, all that stuff. Hit that stuff for me. Everybody else, welcome back. For those of you that have never been here before, I served 17 years as a prisoner in the New York State maximum security prison system. Before that, I was in a life of trouble. Not proud of it, not bragging about it. It's just the reality of what happened to me, but it gives me the credentials to talk about the prison system. And that's what we're going to do in this video right here. We're going to talk about a little bit about the corruption of the prison system, the business of the prison system, and why they are just as criminal, why the prisons are just as criminal as the men that they supervise. So let me get right into it and start by saying this, that the prison and the prison administration does not follow their own rules. That is a big deal, because when you are incarcerating men for breaking the rules, you are incarcerating men for breaking the law. You are incarcerating men because they did not adapt to the rules of society. As the authority and the example, you should follow the rules and the laws yourself. Don't you think that would be a good idea? They do not do that. The prison staff, the prison administration, the state itself do not follow the rules that they create. And what this does is it teaches the men in prison that authority, excuse the expression, is full of shit. What it does is creates resentment inside of the prisoners. What it does is teaches the prisoners that the system is just as corrupt and criminal as those crimes that these gentlemen were sentenced for, right? And if 80% of the men that are incarcerated are going to be released back into the free world, you are releasing them back into the free world with the knowledge that the authority is a farce, that the system is a farce, and that if they don't have to follow the law and they don't have to follow the rules, why should you have to follow the rules and the law? So the system makes a very big mistake in doing that, in giving you countless examples. They can be small examples. It doesn't really matter. Let's say it's something as simple as you're allowed to receive cookies in the package room when you get a food package mailed in. And you go down to pick up your food package, and the officer tells you, you can have this, you can have this, you can have that, but you can't have these cookies right here. Well, why can't I have them? I said you can't have them. That's why. That's how the officer usually responds to you, right? So what do you want to do? You want to donate them? You want to send them back to where they came from? Or do you want to throw them in the garbage? Those are your choices. You can't have them. Now, technically, you're allowed to have them, but the officer's in a bad mood that day. Maybe he wants to eat them for himself, which happens a lot, because a lot of package room officers steal out of the package. You get cigarettes mailed in, the officers take a pack for themselves. You get food mailed in, they take a little bit for themselves. Childish behavior, also illegal behavior, breaking the rules and breaking the law, right? So now you as a prisoner, you don't want to deal with that. You could just say, all right, I don't want to make a big deal about it. I don't want to start no trouble. And you let them get away with their criminal, illegal behavior. Or you can go file a grievance inside of the prison. Then when you file a grievance inside of the prison, the officer wants to plant drugs in your cell. The officer wants to plant a knife in your cell. The officer wants to say that you assaulted him and get you sent to solitary confinement. That's how childish the prison administration is. That's how childish the officers are. They do stuff like this on a regular basis. They do it all the time, right? Then you have that's just like little things, right? You can look at an officer the wrong way. And you look at him the wrong way, and the next thing you know, he's setting you up, right? They're very, very childish. Then you have major corruption. Like they have a program called ASAT, Alcohol Substance Abuse Training. This is a mandatory program that a prisoner must take to be considered for release from incarceration. It is a 6-month drug program that they make you attend. Now, let's say you're not in prison for any drugs, You've never used drugs. You're not in prison for possessing drugs. You're not in, but let's say your crime or conviction is something that's not drug related at all. They are going to force you into this program for 6 months out of your life in prison. They're going to make you take it, even though it's illegal for them to do that because you don't have a drug related crime. Why do they want to put you in the drug program? Because the state gets paid by the federal government for every person that they have in the drug program. So what they're doing is sticking a bunch of people in a drug program that don't need it, right? And let me tell you about the drug program. The drug program, each facility may receive 12 to 20 million dollars a year. 12 to 20 million dollars a year to run this drug program inside of the prison. And with that money that the state receives, they are supposed to hire a civilian to run that program. But what do? They hire a prisoner to run the program. A prisoner who can't even read properly, who can't even talk properly, who's still going for his high school diploma. They pay him $12 a week to run the program. And they have a civilian on the books who never shows up. They don't care what takes place in the program. And remember, this program is mandatory for your release. There's guys in there sniffing heroin off of the desk in the drug program. There's guys in there writing love letters to their wife. That's what they do. So now that one program is a violence program, a drug program, ART, anger replacement training, right? Is a violence program. Same thing. They force people into the violence program even if they don't have a violent crime. Why? Because they want the money from the federal government. They want the millions of dollars that the federal government is going to kick into them. Okay? So this is how their programs work. They have vocational programs like masonry, like wood shop, like custodial maintenance, like radio and television repair. They get big, big money for these vocational programs. And the vocational programs are a farce. The guy in masonry never laid a brick in his life. The guy in radio, television repair is sitting in his office and just letting the prisoners hang out and bullshit all day and do nothing. So there's no real, it looks like on paper it looks great. On paper, it looks like the prison has all these things to offer, but they're just raking in the millions. Billions, I should say. There's billion-dollar budgets. New York State has a $2.3 billion budget for the prison system. $2.3 billion with a B to run the New York State prison system. And what happens is the governor is the one in charge. The governor hires and fires every single warden. The governor hires and fires every single parole commissioner. The governor hires and fires the people that run the prisons inside of the New York system. And so what the governor does is tell them, find ways to save money, right? Cut everything that you can, yeah, right? One of the big things that they cut was the food. They said, according to law, we have to make sure each man has 2,000 calories a day. So they find the cheapest company to provide the cheapest food. And what they do, they right now use a company called Cisco. The food comes in big, huge bags. It's already made. It's like slop. And they throw it inside of a vat and they heat it up and serve it. They found the cheapest way to feed, right? They're not concerned with educating the prisoner. They're not concerned with feeding the prisoner. Now, I know there's, to play devil's advocate, people would say, well, why should they? They're prisoners. They broke the law. You know what I mean? If 80% of the men are going back to the street, you want those men to come out angry? You want those men to come out pissed off? You want those men to come out with a animosity towards authority? Or do you think it would be smarter to try and rehabilitate them? Do you think it would be smarter to try and educate them? Do you think it would be smarter to try and give them skills in order to make it possible for them to survive once they step out the walls of incarceration, right? And so this business of the Department of Corrections is the most corrupt system that there is, and it really comes down to the parole board. The parole board is one of the most corrupt systems inside of the country, okay? Because let me tell you how this works. I'm going to give it to you in a simplistic way. Let's say there's 40,000 prisoners in New York State. New York State has 40,000 men incarcerated. So the federal government says, okay, we're going to give you $2.3 billion to help take care of those 40,000 prisoners, to run the prison system, right? They say that it takes $140,000 a year to take care of each prisoner. Are they crazy? That's what the state is telling the federal government, that it takes $140,000 a year to take care of each prisoner. It doesn't take $20,000 a year to take care of each prisoner with the way they feed them and the lack of medical care. But they say it takes 100. So the federal government says, all right, we're going to give you $2.1 billion to run the prison system, right? That's for 40,000 prisoners. But if your prison population drops under 30,000, we're going to cut $1 billion. We're only going to give you $1 billion. So now if I'm the governor, I say, no, wait a minute. I need that $2.3 billion. So I'm going to make sure that my prison population stays above 30,000 so I can get that check from the federal government. So how do I do that? How do I make sure my population stays above 30,000? Well, what I do is I take into account how many people are in jail, Rikers Island Jail, Nassau County Jail, Suffolk County Jail, all the county jails, right? I get the information and I get the data and I find out how many men are in jail, sentenced to prison, and they're on their way up to prison. Once I have that number, that will determine how many men I can release at the parole board. You see, it doesn't matter whether the men earned release or not. It doesn't matter whether the men deserve release or not. It doesn't matter whether the men are entitled to release or not, right? It matters that this governor maintains a way to get that check from the federal government, right? And so he says, okay, if I have 5,000 coming in this month from the county jails, that means I can release 5,000 from the prison system at parole. So if you're going to the parole board and you're number 5,001, it doesn't matter whether you earn release or not. You're not going anywhere because this governor wants to get his check of $2.3 billion. Are you guys following me? Right? So it becomes a business. It becomes a business. Right? And this is why when they want to privatize prisons, and they have privatized prisons in many states throughout the country, a lot of people, a lot of businessmen were first online because they realized that they can get a large amount of money from the federal government. They realized that they can get an amount of money from the federal government that they will not have to spend on the prisoners. Right? And the more programs that you cut, right, the more things you can do to save money, like medical care. This is why the medical care in prison is so terrible. They don't want to spend money taking care of you medically. They want to do as least as possible. This way they can save as much as possible. And so now if you understand all that, and I'm just giving you a very brief analogy, right? It's not an analogy, it's actual fact though. Right. But what I'm saying is I'm just giving you a brief synopsis of how this works. Right. And, if that's the way that it is, right, the first thing I say is do not become part of the system. If you are in prison and you are guilty, then you subjected yourself to this corruption. Are you following me? You subjected yourself to their power. You subjected yourself to the abuse because the system is just as corrupt and just as criminal as the people that they supervise. They might even be more criminal. Everyone looks at the prisoners as the bad guy. And I'm not saying they're good guys for committing crimes. I'm not saying I was a good guy when I was running around like a criminal. I wasn't a good guy. Right. But what happens is they convince society that the people that are incarcerated are these wild animalistic animals. Right. The worst of the worst, the bottom of the barrel. But meanwhile, the ones with the suits and ties are just as bad. And we're learning that now through technology of the internet when we get to hear the trouble that politicians are in. When we get to hear that the politicians are flying on planes and molesting children on Epstein's Island, when the governor of Chicago is smoking crack and he has $5 million in his freezer. When Elliot Spitzer, the governor of New York, is allegedly sending pictures of his penis to 15-year-old girls, right? When President Clinton is sleeping with a 20-year-old while he's president in the White House, and his wife and kids are down the hallway, and then he lies to the American people, right? When the mayor of New York, right, is accepting bribes under the table. When Nancy Pelosi is in doing insider traders, alleged insider trader, and she has a salary of $140,000 a year, and she's worth $419 million. Something is wrong. It's not just the men that are in prison that are the criminals. That's what they want you to think. The system is criminal. All of them. JFK, John F. Kennedy, was sleeping with tons of women behind his wife's back, screwing Marilyn Monroe. The other Kennedy killed a woman with a golf club. The other Kennedy let a girl drown in a car. The grandfather was a bootlegger for the mafia. Right? They were all dirty. But you vote for them. You shake their hand. Oh, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. And you think that the guy in prison is the real danger. The guy in prison may have done something one time and gotten caught, and they put him in prison for 10, 15 years. But these politicians do it every single day, all day long. They have no morals, no values. They are the true criminals. Okay? And then you're waving the American flag. I know you're proud to be an American, right? And there's some good stuff about the country. There's some great stuff about the country. But the people that are running it are just as criminal as the people in this prison system. They just do it with a suit and tie on. And so, yes, the system is corrupt. That's the point of this video right here. The system is corrupt. The programs are a farce. The parole board is a farce. And what they need to concentrate on, if they had any morals or any values, they would adopt one thing that we've all heard of, one word that we all know: rehabilitation. The New York State prison system and the prison system in the United States of America in general does not focus on rehabilitation. It focuses on incarceration. And again, if 80% are coming back to the street, you should be focusing on rehabilitation. And the number one way to do that is through education. Right? That's the number. There's a couple of ways to do it, but a big one is education. If 78% of men that are going into prison do not even have a high school diploma, when they get out of prison, they are undereducated and now a convicted felon. So their chance of obtaining employment has diminished because they were in the prison system. You should enter a prison system that increases your ability to survive in society. That's what a system should focus on. And one way that you do that is through education. And if I was running a prison, what I would do is saying, this prisoner is not taking he's not getting any job, he's not taking any programs, he's not participating in anything until he gets his GED. Then once he gets his GED, we need to either talk about secondary education, which is college, right? And serious vocational training. Not the vocational training they have. Television and radio repair, custodial maintenance, right? How is that going to help people in today's world of technology? You need to teach these guys website design. You need to teach these guys computer technology. You need to teach them computer repair, as well as plumbing and electrical and real trades where they can survive, and have real civilians in there teaching these trades to these individuals. And you say, well, are they worth it? They are worth it. Because they're human beings. They are worth it. Are there some of them that you can't rehabilitate? Absolutely. I'm the first to tell you that there's a very large majority of men in prison that have never done anything good for society. They've lived their lives to take advantage of every single person they meet, and they blame everything on other people. They blame the judge, they blame the lawyer, they blame the cop, they blame their parents, they blame their upbringing. I had a little blame in my story. I blame the fact that I was sexually abused. I blame the fact that my father left. I blame the fact that I had a mentally ill mother. But ultimately, I knew the difference from right or wrong. I didn't respond the right way, and I had to pay the price. So there's men in prison that you'll never be able to rehabilitate. But water them out then. Give it a shot anyway. Give it a try. You would want to give it a try if it was your son or your daughter or your brother or your mother or your father who made the mistake and got incarcerated. Right? So the system is dirty. It's a very dirty system. On one hand, you could say, the system just gave up. They're not trying to help these guys no more. They don't give. They don't care about them. They see them as waste of life. And there's some people that take that point of view, right? And there's other people that say we should at least try and help these individuals, And so after, I'll end with this. After you make them focus on education and trying to obtain some type of vocation for real, not just on paper, so you can stick the money in your pocket, Governor, when you really want to concentrate on it. After that, you have to involve them in a therapeutic community. Right? I was in prison. Let me give you an example of this. This is very important. I'm going to end with this. I was in prison for killing a man. It's something I regret terribly. And I don't say those words to be politically correct. I was a lost, drug addicted kid. I was definitely wild, definitely crazy, but I didn't want to end up killing a guy. And I did. Right? And it was a very brutal, brutal killing. I was under the influence of angel dust. I stabbed someone over 80 times. And it was very bad. I lost my mind while I was under the influence of drugs. The guy stabbed me first twice. I went crazy, and that's part of the story. But my point is this. Through 17 years of incarceration, nobody asked me how I felt when I committed that crime. Nobody. There's people that kill people, and they enjoyed it. There's people that killed people, and they got off on it. Let me clearly state, I am not one of those individuals. But there are people that enjoyed killing someone. No one ever asked me how I felt when I killed that guy. Don't you think that's an important question to ask someone who's in prison for murder? No one ever asked me in 17 years if I planned on doing it again. No one ever asked me. Don't you think that's an important question to ask someone who's in prison for killing someone if they plan on doing it again? Let me clearly state, I do not ever plan on doing it again. But that's an important question to ask someone. Even when I went to the parole board and they're deciding my release, they're trying to decide my release. They never asked me how I felt when I did it. They never asked me if I planned on doing it again. They didn't even care about my mind frame. They were too focused on the financial aspect that in business with the governor, that if they release me, will they get that check? They don't care about a case-by-case basis. They don't care about that. It's a corrupt system, and I am just scratching the surface in this video. Scratching the surface in it. The system needs to change. People need to start caring. That's what it is. But nobody cares. Nobody cares. It's the truth. And they especially don't care about the majority of people that are coming out of the projects of Brooklyn, the Bronx, Queens, Manhattan, people who they consider at the bottom of the barrel. They're like, these people are no benefit to society. Why should we care about them? The answer is because we should care about everyone, and we should try and fix people that are lost. At least give it a shot. Do I believe there are some guys in prison that can't be rehabilitated? I think there's a lot of them. Do I think there's people in prison that should never ever be released? Absolutely. If I was on the parole board, I probably wouldn't release quite a pretty significant percentage of them, because I realize that there's some real bad dudes in there. But there's a lot of guys that made mistakes. A lot of people that were there because of drug addiction. A lot of there because people that had very screwed up childhoods. And the system should be created to take care of these individuals, to help them, to give it a shot. I'll take care. I'll see you guys later.